What is tragedy? In this video, we will be looking at the third and final play in Aeschylus' trilogy, the Oresteia, and that's called the Eumenides. At the end of the previous play in the trilogy, the Libation Bearers, Orestes leaves the stage in terror, possessed by and pursued by the Furies. No one else sees them, but to him they are real enough. They are clearly a psychological manifestation of his guilt at killing his own mother. But to the Greek mind, the Furies were also objectively real. They were ancient divinities who had a particular role in punishing a specific kind of killing, the killing of someone who was a blood relative. Now, any kind of killing in the ancient world generated pollution. The killer was polluted not just literally, physically, but also spiritually. And this pollution had to be cleansed ritually. We see in the picture on the right-hand side of this slide a vase which represents Orestes being defended by Apollo from the attack of the Furies. And in the image on the left-hand side, we see Orestes at the oracle of Apollo in Delphi, taking part in a ritual of purification. On the far left of the image, we see Clytemnestra trying to rouse the sleeping Furies. In the center, we see Orestes holding a sword, with a priest holding over his head a piglet. Now, we may well wonder what a piglet is doing in this ritual. But as the translator of Aeschylus, Christopher Collard, tells us, piglets as immature and therefore in a sense pure creatures were killed in this ritual in what was regarded as a safe reenactment of that original homicide. Then the blood of the piglet was poured over the hands of the murderer, symbolically cleansing him from his offence. The Oresteia is often seen, and rightly seen, as the story of a series of violent killings which form a pattern of retribution and vengeance until finally at the end of the Eumenides we move into a new order, a new dispensation, in which justice rather than vendetta seems to hold sway. But we can also highlight the fact that throughout the narrative, these killings are in particular kinds of transgression of the boundary between the human and the non-human. We saw earlier in this series that tragedy is often a liminal genre. It places us, or its characters, on the threshold, often the threshold between the human and the divine. And it seems that if we look at the various moments which punctuate this cycle of killing, each one is a particular kind of transgression. These are monstrous offences. First of all, Atreus kills the sons of his brother Thyestes and serves them up to their father in a meal, the human treated as if it were animal, merely meat. Later, Agamemnon sacrifices his daughter Iphigenia, replacing the usual ritual of animal sacrifice with human sacrifice. Again, the human treated as animal. Later, again, Agamemnon at his homecoming treads on the tapestries that have been spread out to lead him from his chariot up to the door of the house, accepting the kind of honour which should really be accorded only to a god. Clytemnestra kills him after trapping him in a kind of net which she throws over him when he's in the bath, as if he were a wild animal caught and then slaughtered. A common feature to all these transgressions is, of course, that they offend against the bonds which unite the family. And Clytemnestra's transgression, her killing of her own husband, when it's punished by her own death, becomes yet another transgression, because she is killed by her own son Orestes. This is matricide. But as we saw in the previous video, there are different explanations for the agent who carries out this killing. And at one point Orestes tells Clytemnestra that she is killing herself. Her murder is represented as in effect a kind of suicide, because her act in killing Agamemnon is repeated in her own death at the hands of Orestes. A whole series then of monstrous transgressions, deforming the human and perverting the relationships which should sustain the family and should also sustain the borders between the human and the animal and the human and the divine. It seems at first as if the monstrous is going to be punished only by the monstrous, this time in the form of the Furies. The Furies are neither human nor amongst the Olympian gods. They are older divinities than Zeus or Apollo or Athene. They therefore inhabit a special realm of their own. They are female in appearance, but are frightening. They are monstrous. They are called evil, but actually what they pursue is not evil but justice. Justice for the victims of a killing by a blood relative. But the priestess of Apollo regards their presence in the sanctuary of Apollo's oracle at Delphi as itself a form of pollution. Here we are very much rooted in the old world, and the play moves us on to find another way out, another form of justice, another form of conclusion and closure. So Athene herself, the patroness of Athens, sets up a form of court which decides on the guilt or innocence of Orestes, giving herself the casting vote. And she votes, of course, for the acquittal of Orestes, partly on the grounds that as a goddess who had no mother, she was born directly from Zeus himself, she prefers the male over the female. What follows is a chorus of despair and rage from the Furies, until eventually Athene manages to persuade them that what lies before them now in Athens is an altogether different role. They will still be protecting the family, blood relationships, kinship, but they will be doing it, as it were, positively rather than negatively. They will be the goddesses who preside over fertility, over the successful cultivation of crops, as well as the human family. They're placed, therefore, into the social structure of Athens. And so it is that the cycle, which has been obsessed by the transgressions of the boundaries between the human and the animal, and the human and the divine, ends with the integration of the Furies into the social structure of Athens. As this happens, they are renamed Eumenides, the kindly ones. And what happens at the end of the play, therefore, is not simply the establishment of a new form of justice, the establishment of a particular court, which the Athenians in the audience would have recognized, but the establishment of what we might describe as the right relationship between earth, mortals, and gods. The Eumenides are going to nurture and protect the relationship that human beings have with the earth that they cultivate. A very intimate relationship, intimate and creative, becomes established between humans and divinities. And so the cycle, which had led us through a whole series of monstrous transgressions, ends in Athens in what the Athenians would have regarded as the city of reason. After all, Apollo, who presides over the killing of Clytemnestra by Orestes, is the god of the sun, of light, of rationality, and of poetry. Athene is the goddess of wisdom. She also uses her techniques of persuasion, rational argument, when drawing the Furies away from their previous role into their new function as the Eumenides. Reason, persuasion, wisdom, and also light. At the beginning of the Agamemnon, the watchman crouches on the roof of the house in darkness and suddenly sees the light of the beacon that is transmitting the message from Troy. At the end of the Eumenides, we have the torchlit procession of mortals and gods into the city, one light replacing another. And there's another small detail that might well have been quite remarkable for the first audiences of the Oresteia. A little detail suggests that as the Eumenides process into the city, they are reclothed in red. A visual echo of that dark red river of tapestries and embroideries that led from Agamemnon's chariot into his house. That is one of the markers of transition and transformation which the Oresteia attempts to bring about.